Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 11th YouTube session of the Read for Pixels of the Pixel Project's 9th International Women's Day edition of our Read for Pixels campaign. My name is Anusha Kandasivam. I'm your moderator for this session. Through Read for Pixels, the Pixel Project is collaborating with 13 award-winning and best-selling authors to raise awareness about violence against women and to raise funds for the Pixel Project to keep our efforts to end violence against women alive and kicking. I'll be telling you more about the Read for Pixels fundraiser. Alive and kicking. I'll be telling you more about the Read for Pixels fundraiser. Alive and kicking. And I'll be telling you more about the Read for Pixels fundraiser. Alive and kicking. Sorry, there was an echo there. I don't know if anybody could hear it. All right, so let's get back to that. Yes, we have a very special guest today for today's live Read for Pixels discussion and Q&A session. Is the fabulous science fiction and fantasy author Liz Williams. Here we are. Today's live Read for Pixels discussion and Q&A session is the fabulous science fiction and fantasy author Liz Williams. Here we are. Today's live Read for Pixels. Sorry, Liz. Do you have your YouTube on? Okay, I think you need to mute that. Or do you have your YouTube on?
I've got. I think I'm.
Okay, I think you need to mute that. Or do you have? I think you need to mute that. Or do you have?
Okay, so we have a little bit of an echo.
You need to mute that. Or okay, hold on. Let's fix it. Could you close all your windows except for the StreamYard one? Got it?
Yes. Hold on.
How's it going? Yeah. Okay. I think we're good now. Yeah.
I'm good. I've closed everything.
All right. Yes. Okay. Here we go. Sorry. Yeah. There was a bit. I think it was a bit of a bug as well because everything is muted usually, and then suddenly the. Okay, never mind. Let's move on. So, hi, Liz. Thanks for being here with us today.
Well, technology, it's sent to try us, basically.
Yes. All right. So, here's a little introduction to Liz. Not that you need it. So, Liz has written lots and lots of books. Her books include the Fellow Sisters series and the Detective Inspector Chen series and many, many novels. Her books are published by Benton Spectra and Open Road in the USA and by Tor Macmillan and Newcon Press in the UK. And she has also published a book on the history of paganism in Britain called Miracles of Our Own Making, and the book Modern Hand Fasting, which is a complete guide to the magic of pagan weddings, which I think is so cool. And she's also working on a new book of folklore, and more about that later. So aside from joining today's Read for Pixels live stream session, Liz has also generously donated some exclusive gifts to the stash of author goodies we have set up as treats for donors at the Read for Pixels Rally Up fundraising page. So I'll tell you what they are. First is the Liz Williams paperback and ebook starter book bundle. And this is available for donors worldwide. So Liz is giving away one exclusive starter book bundle to a Read for Pixels donor anywhere in the world. And this bundle contains one signed and personalized paperback edition of Comet Weather, one signed and personalized paperback novella, which is Phosphorus, one ebook edition of Comet Weather, and one ebook edition of Phosphorus. So all the paperbacks in this bundle will be signed and personalized for the donor any way you want, to any name you want, I mean. And all the ebooks will be sent directly to the donor by the publisher.
Yes.
So that's the first bundle. And the second goodie that Liz has donated is a 30-minute Zoom call. So Liz has graciously donated the 30 minutes of her time for one Read for Pixels donor, where she'll be happy to chat about the art and craft of writing, about publishing books, your favorite fantasy books, and more with you or your group. So this session is to be conducted in English, and it can be for individual donors, for book clubs, for libraries. So there's just one of this very rare donor treat available, so go and get it before anyone else does. All these goodies are available on our Rally Up fundraising page. We'll put the links up in a bit. We have had a very slow start to our fundraiser. We've only had, let's check, $2,380, which is about 47% raised towards our $5,000 goal so far, and it's already the 4th week of our campaign. So please do give generously before the fundraiser ends on the 15th of April. All funds go towards the Pixel Project's work to help end violence against women. All right, so we're going to move on to the reading, but actually, before that, I want to remind everybody, you, the audience, you can participate. You'll be able to ask Liz your questions. Just make sure you're logged onto your YouTube account so that you can type your questions into the chat box to the right of your screen. And Regina, who is today's producer and chat box moderator, will relay them to me to read out to Liz to answer. Okay, so over to you, Liz. What will you be reading for us today?
So I'm just going to check that you can hear me okay.
Yes, loud and
That's
clear.
That's fantastic. So today I'm going to be reading from the third of the Fallow Sisters novels. This is a novel called Embertide, and perhaps appropriate, it's set in the spring. So it's set round about now, and this was published last year at that particular time of year. These are seasonal novels. First one is set in the autumn, the second one in the winter, the third one in the spring, and the fourth one, which we'll talk about later, is coming out this summer. And the Fallow Sisters novels are set in England. They're partly set in London, and they're set in other parts of the south of the country, which is where I myself live. I live in the southwest. And they are very female-centric. They're all about women. And Embertide, I think in particular, is about women, I'm happy to say, behaving badly. And the bit that I'm about to read is basically set about three-quarters of the way through the novel, and one of the older ladies, Luna's sort of step-grandmother or grandmother-in-law, and her name is Vervain. She has basically been invited to come down to Somerset and undertake in some troublemaking by an old friend. And the troublemaking is in the form of a road protest. We have a lot of road protests in this country. We're constantly under, threat of new high-speed rail links and high-speed road links, and there's a lot of fuss around that sort of thing. We're a tiny, tiny little country, and it's difficult to get from A to B. They are constantly revising the road network, but sometimes at a big cost to the countryside. So this is the scenario in which we find ourselves.
All right, take it away.
Okay. The road protest was kicking off in earnest later that day, according to Ver. Luna had said that she would go down and take a look. In doing this, she felt torn between her sister, Sam, and his gran. Sam was working that day, and Luna felt she ought to look after Ver, just in case trouble started. But both Bea and Sam thought she ought not to go. I don't want to be all patriarchal, Sam said. Well, I do, said Bea. Matriarchal, anyway. I'm worried about you. You don't have to worry, I'll be all right. You want to ask Ver about the Battle of the Beanfields, Sam said. Stonehenge, 1985. Pregnant women dragged screaming out of vans by the hair by the police. To be fair, I think it was only one pregnant woman, Sam, but I agree, one's too many. I don't trust the police, Luna said, but it's all very well trying to stay safe when the other world comes looking for you. Perhaps I can wren it. If Laura can choose how she changes shape, I bet I can too. I just have to learn how. I'll drive you, said a voice from the door. Mother! Bea, if she wants to go, I think she should. But on condition that she stays in the car until we see the lie of the land. Luna thought that her mother Alice might be rather keen to go too. For reasons of her own? Or simple curiosity? But she knew a bargain when she heard one. All right, thanks, Mum. Text Ver and tell her we're on our way. Text me if she gets arrested, Sam said. I bet your gran's too canny to get arrested, Alice said. You might be right. She never has been, not as far as I know. But I wouldn't put it past her to do it just for a new experience. That's all we need. Luna agreed. All the more reason to keep an eye on Ver. Thus Luna and Alice, sensibly dressed and with flat shoes in case they had to move quickly on rough ground, drove to the camp and parked up. The place seemed deserted, but as Luna got out of the car, a very young woman in her teens came holding a baby and smiling. They've all gone down to the road. You're Ver's granddaughter, aren't you? Her grandson's my partner, actually, but I'm happy to claim her as my nan. She's so great. I love her. I didn't go because of this one, but that's okay. I can tell people where they are. She pointed with a brightly mittened hand. See the track? Keep going and you'll come to a lane. Then turn left and it's down the road. Thank you, Luna said, and they set off over old pasture starred with celandines. There were dandelions starting to come out now, drawn by the warmth of the sun, and Luna reflected that it would soon be time to make dandelion wine and to see if any coltsfoot was to be found in the hedges, to be made into remedies for coughs. She could hear the protest before she saw it. There was drumming and some kind of chant, which came faintly across the mild air. Someone whooped. Well, sounds like they're having a good time, Alice said. It sounds happy, Luna agreed. We needn't stay long. You just tell me if you want to go. I'm sure Ver can look after herself, and maybe we can talk her into coming to supper. Oh, that would be good. But Luna wanted to talk to Ver first. Now's your chance, she thought, for there was Ver herself, perched on an ancient tractor and waving. Like your new motor, Alice called up. Ver looked very small, high on the bucket seat behind the driver, a young man in a spotted scarf like Pigling Bland. I'm not driving it, Ver said, just along for the ride. Hang on, I'll get down. And she did so in a flurry of skirts. So, she said once she was on solid ground, they're planning on a blockade. The first earth-moving equipment's due in tomorrow morning. People will be lying down in front of it. The rest of us will be chained to the tractors. This afternoon's just for show, but we will be having a go slow along the main road, should you care to join us. Luna, are you up for a walk? A slow one? Luna nodded. I can manage that for a couple of miles. Oh, it'll be a pleasure to have you along. We're going east anyway, so you'll be practically back at the lane going down to the campsite before you know it. Luna looked down from the high ridge of land. They were on the slopes of the Tor still, the long rolling skirts of the hill, and she could see west towards the estuary. The hedges were greening with hawthorn. She looked up into the mild, bright sky and thought that this was a good day to be out on the land. She had missed this early in the year, despite her adventures. But those had been in the winter world, when the land had drawn in on itself, bud cramped in the twig and the sky lowering. A sound interrupted her trance. It was sonorous and booming, atavistic as a bittern's cry. Luna looked along the road and saw a man, bare-chested and spiraled with blue, blowing a long battle horn. For a second she wondered if he'd come from the other world, but then she realized he was wearing a plaid shirt tied around his waist and stout boots. Hiya, Mac, someone cried. The man waved, raised the horn, and blew again. I think they used those against the Romans, Alice said. Luna could see why. The sound made her shiver. She wanted to run over to the man and say, Don't. You'll attract too much attention. She wondered why the thought had come to her and told herself that it was silly, but perhaps it was not. The tractor on which Ver had been perched was pulling ahead, the crowd parting like the Red Sea. There was a creak of gears and it reversed, turned and stopped, blocking the road. The engine was switched off and the tractor shuddered into silence. Well, said Alice, no one's going to get past that. Luna went to sit down with Ver on the piece of grassy verge that aproned a farm gate, while Alice roamed about, chatting to people. Making friends, your mum, said Ver. It was hard to tell whether or not she approved. She's got the gift of the gab, hasn't she? Yeah, when she wants to. She can talk to anyone. And does. Have there been any more disturbances back at the house? All quiet for the last few days or so. I wish I could say it would stay that way. Ver was busying herself with plucking daisies and threading them into a chain, but it never does. I learned that early on.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
it. Okay.
I haven't quite finished. Okay. There, I had to scroll down a little bit. There. Crown for my Princess Luna. Ver handed Luna the daisy chain. Thank you. It's so pretty. Not for long, though. Never mind. I shall wear it till it fades, and then I shall put it into the compost heap, and the whole cycle can start over again. Oh, what's going on? The inevitable had happened. Luna and Ver stood up to get a better look. A car had come along the road and discovered that its way was blocked. The driver was now out of the car and remonstrating. He was middle-aged, in a tight, rather shiny blue suit, and becoming redder in the face by the minute. It was a nice car. Luna could see the azure and white BMW badge on the bonnet. He's not taking it well, Ver said, not without sympathy. Mind you, it must be very annoying. They're telling drivers to go back round Hoxley. Alice strolled up to join them. Another 15 minutes. Someone's done that already. Oh, we didn't see them. Farmer in a Land Rover. He wasn't happy either, but he just turned round and went. Snatches of conversation floated across. Damn nuisance, I'll call the police. It ought to be banged up, load of effing anarchists. Technically, of course, we are not anarchists, Ver remarked. I think he'd find the camp rather orderly. I myself am quite an admirer of the Queen, and not the only one there either. He's going to do himself a mischief if he carries on like that. Several other cars had now backed up behind the BMW driver. But I can see that if perhaps you need to be somewhere urgently, like the doctor's, and you find your way impeded by a motley crew, He doesn't have to be anywhere there, I bet. He's just going to be like that because he can. Look at him. He's the type, you can tell. The great horn sounded again. From the other side of the tor, Luna heard a more familiar noise on the wind, the shriek of a siren. Looking back along the road, she saw a hectic flicker of blue lights. The farmer in the Land Rover, perhaps, had called the police. "That'll show you," shouted BMW man. "Perverts?" "Now that is uncalled for," Ver said. "What sort of perverts, I wonder?" murmured Alice. The police car was now quite close. They watched it come around the bend and slow to a stop when the driver saw the crowd. A couple of resigned policemen got out of it. "Get them off the road," bawled BMW man. "Do your job." "Who's in charge here?" asked the older policeman. "Nobody," a voice cried. "Echoes of Odysseus," said Alice. "All right, who can we speak to then? Who owns this vehicle?" The policeman squinted up at the tractor. "Don't know, mate. Haven't a clue." "Are you the driver, sir?" the policeman said to Mac, who was closest to the tractor. "Indeed I'm not," Max said with apparently genuine regret. "I'd love to help, but it's not my tractor. I don't even have a license." "Well, how do you get about then, sir?" the younger officer offered. "Shanks's pony and the occasional bus." The more senior policeman came over to Alice, perhaps because she was the person who looked the most respectable. "Madam, do you happen to know who owns this vehicle?" "I'm afraid I don't." "Yes, she does." BMW man was now bearing down upon them, even more crimson of face than he had appeared from a distance. "That," said Ver sotto voce, "is exactly the sort of man who bullies women." "Good luck with that," said Luna. Alice said very coolly, "I'm afraid I do not know, and I can't think what would make you think that I do." "Mrs. Stuck-up, aren't you?" No, sir, I'm afraid I'm to ask you to remain civil," the policeman said. But BMW man had passed that point. Standing within inches of Alice, he bellowed. "I won't help," Alice said. The policeman started forwards. Luna did not actually see red, but she felt it in her head, hot and bursting. "You leave my mum alone," she shouted. She tried to get between them, but Alice was quicker. She gave Luna a quick push back into Ver's arms as the man, open-handed, slapped Alice across the face. "Hey!" the policeman cried. Alice punched BMW man in the nose exceedingly hard. He sat down as though someone had cut the strings of a puppet. Suddenly, there was blood everywhere. "I told you that wouldn't help," Alice said. Much later, Luna and Ver entered the Mooncote kitchen to find Bee washing out a woolly jumper in the sink. "Hi, what a beautiful afternoon it's been. How did you get on? Did you have a nice time?" "Yes, well," Luna said. "Mum's been arrested." Okay, I have finished now.
All right, that was great. That escalated quickly.
Yes. Yes,
It was,
we tend to.
yeah, it was so fun though, and yeah, it's such a fun scene. But the fellow sisters are usually quite fun, I think.
Good, yes, they are. They go their own way.
Yeah,
And
they do.
they won't be told what to do. And their mother is even worse.
Yeah,
Hooray. And their
yeah,
grandmothers are worse. So
yeah,
they are women who are just they're just doing their own thing, really. They're
yeah,
not
yeah,
out to anybody.
yeah. Which brings me nicely to my very first question. So, your books feature plenty of fantastic female characters, like the fellow sisters we just met, and their family, their mother, their grandmothers, and you have other characters like Dreams of War, Luna, Mavenin. They're all complex characters with agency, their own motivations, their own strengths and weaknesses. So my first question is, what or who are your inspirations for your female characters?
They come from all over the place, and they do definitely come from reading a lot of women or female written science fiction in the 1970s, because that's when I started writing and reading. And I say I started writing. I started writing kind of Lloyd Alexander fanfic, actually. But some of the guys writing did have fantastic female characters. I'm a big fan of Jack Vance, and I loved his work, but I didn't feel that the women were as strongly depicted as the men. But Ursula Le Guin, Susie McKee Charnas, Joan Vinge, there are a lot of people who were writing then whose work I felt that I really resonated with, because they showed a huge range of women and a huge range of societies in which women had sometimes agency, sometimes not very much agency at all, but that was the point of the story, like some of Charnas's work. And that's really what got me. It started me off as a feminist, so I came to feminism through science fiction,
Oh, that's great.
rather than the other way around. And I became a strong feminist in my teens, and I sought out work which was female oriented, you know, and transgressive, and gave us lots of role models and lots of ways to be. Because I think it's always, you know, the publishing industry is not so great. It kind of narrows everything down over the years. It's, you know, it wants a particular type of woman rather than a big range of women. And I think that's actually deleterious. So I try and, you know, I try and correct it in my work, but an awful lot of other people happily are now doing the same, and they always have done. You know, I have 4 mothers, and in the literary scene, not just in science fiction, but also, you know, people in mainstream fiction. I've just been rereading Sylvia Townsend Warner's Lolly Willows, who is absolutely a woman, you know, 100 years ago, who refuses to play the game in a kind of a quiet way. She just goes off to a village and decides that she'll become a witch, and she does. And nothing terrible happens to her. She absolutely gets away with it. And I thought, yeah, we need more women getting away with it, really.
I thought that was so awesome that the fellow sisters were just going along, just doing whatever they wanted and just being witchy, if you will, you know, just living their lives. Yeah, that was so cool. Well, and yeah, so speaking of stereotypes and tropes in the genre, so all genres have their share of female stereotypes and tropes. You have so many different types of women in your stories. How do you break stereotypes and subvert tropes to create female characters with agency who deal with the world around them, like including things like sexism, misogyny, and violence against women and girls, especially those who do not fit into culturally prescribed gendered norms, including appearance and behavior?
Yeah, I think you have to look at, first of all, you have to look at the women you know, most of whom in my life do not fit absolutely kind of rigid stereotypes. I think you have to, in that sense, be realistic, because, you know, many of us are sort of norm busting in just as a matter of course. I know women who do a lot of reenactment. They like fighting with swords. They like making swords. They like dressing up in armor, but they also like knitting. They like cooking. You know, they like a range of things. And I feel that it's sort of been for, you know, historically, the men are constrained in a different way. But we all really should have, you know, choices. I think if, you know, if you have a son and he wants to wear a skirt and makeup, I think absolutely he should be allowed to wear makeup and wear a skirt. And I think your daughter should be allowed to wave a sword around if she wants to. But she should also perhaps be allowed to be a princess if she wants to. You know, we need choices. And this is something that is brought out in the Matter of Britain in the Arthurian mythos, when one of the knights meets the loathly lady. You know, she gives him a choice. She'll either be fantastically fair and beautiful at night, so that he gets the pleasure of her company as a beautiful woman, or she can be loathly throughout. Then she can be loathly throughout the day. She can be ugly throughout the day, and all the other knights will pity him. Or he can swap, so that all the knights envy the beautiful woman on his arm, but in the night she turns back to this crone aspect, this dark goddess aspect. And she asks him that question, and he says that he will let her choose, which is absolutely the right choice, because then she chooses which form she wants to take. And I think we should all have as much choice as possible. So I kind of mix it up. You know, Dreams of War in Banner of Souls is a warrior. She's terrifically physically strong. She's actually not the brightest person on the face of several planets. She's a bit on the thick side, and that's fine. You know, there is nothing to say that women have to be super heroines. They can have a lot of flaws, and they can have a lot of stuff wrong with them. Dreams of War likes to get things done by hitting things, you know, but other characters maybe won't go down that route. Some of the people in the Fallow Sisters books, you know, Stella is quite sort of ballsy and out there, but Serena is quite a timid person in many respects. She will talk her way out of situations, and I think we just need that mix. We need lots of ways to be.
Yeah, you're right. And because in the end, I mean, I say this a lot, but women are people, and people there are so many different types of people. Yeah.
It's just, men, when, and I guess this is a case in some very conservative societies perhaps, but when men say, I don't understand women, what they're really saying is, I don't understand anyone.
Yes.
They
Yeah.
don't understand people. We are just human beings. We've got all the range of stuff that human beings have. And I think this is why when the concept was introduced to media and to literature, the Bechdel test
Oh yes.
became such an important thing because, most of the time when I'm talking to female friends, I do talk about my partner and I do talk about men, but I also talk about politics. I talk about the garden. I talk about the
Yes.
cat.
Yes.
I talk about cooking. I talk about wars.
Yes.
It's like all of us. I think all of us. I'm starting to rant, aren't I?
No.
But we
But
just talk about everything. We are human beings. You're
yeah.
absolutely right. We are people.
Yeah. So actually, I was going to ask you about the Bechdel test and why you think so many authors in science fiction and fantasy have trouble writing stories that pass this test, despite the fact, like you said, that we speak about so many other things other than men. Oh,
Yeah. Well, the private theory is that although people are writing science fiction and fantasy, a lot of people, I don't think, and I'm not going to name names, don't have very much imagination. Or they have a great imagination when it comes to world building, but they don't have a great imagination when it comes to other people.
to people, yeah.
And the women are there really just to sort of serve the male gaze in various forms and to move the plot along. And they're a fantasy.
Yeah.
They're as much of a fantasy as an elf or a dragon or a sea serpent. They are not real human beings. They're just a fantasy, and
Yeah.
they're kind of bolted onto the manuscript. So I find that a bit tedious. But I think women are also encouraged by the publishing industry to move into particular tropes. So I think, personally, I'm not a massive fan of an awful lot of feisty heroines.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that we're in danger of creating stereotypes in another
Yeah.
direction. And
Yes.
maybe that's a course correction. We have pendulum swings.
Yes.
But I really do think we need a range. And I think men need to work a bit harder. The sort of the busty blonde who needs to be rescued all the time, that is very boring.
Yes.
But the woman who is essentially just kind of in male drag, she can be as boring as well.
Oh yes.
And they see her as the strong woman, but there are lots of different types of strength.
Yeah. So speaking of strength, your female characters they're well-rounded, I would say. Just yeah, they're tough and resilient, and they're everything they should be. But readers may perceive them as unlikable. This is in air
Yes.
quotes. Instead of lauding them as compelling and gritty characters, as they probably would do if they were male. Do you ever feel pressured by gender and cultural stereotypes to make your female characters likable or relatable? Or have you ever got any flack for not making a female character likable enough?
I've had a little bit of flack, but they've been the only flack I ever actually really got was for Inari in the Chen books, who is quite a sort of quiet, traditional sort of person, and that's just how she is. She's strong in her own way.
Yeah.
And that was from a woman who said that she was too stereotyped and she needed to be a warrior. And that to me is like, okay, then the course correction has gone a little bit far.
Yeah.
But no, I don't really worry about making characters likable, and I think that's because science fiction and fantasy used to be a lot kind of wider when I was growing up and reading it, and authors didn't really worry too much about whether their characters were likable or not.
Yeah.
So I didn't. I mean, there are people in fiction whom I really don't want to spend a whole lot of time with, but at the same time, there are people who I don't like them, but I'm interested in their story.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm interested in how they get their comeuppance, perhaps. And I'm
Yeah.
interested in where they go and how they develop and how they change. So because of that, I never worry too much about making people likable.
Yeah.
A lot of the time when I read, I do want to have likable characters, and I do want to spend time with those people. And that's maybe when I'm reading for relaxation rather than reading for a stimulation or a challenge, because
Yes.
I think the way that readers are not allowed to read for fun in some people's eyes, or they're only allowed to read for fun. They can't read for different reasons at different times of the day.
Yeah.
Get away from that one as well. It's people read for all sorts of reasons, and if they pick up an airport thriller at the airport and they just want something fun to read on the plane, why not? That is as legitimate as anything else. And this sort of reading shaming, which goes in both directions, I find a bit off, actually.
Yeah, that's weird, isn't it? All right, we have a question from one of the audience. Actually, it's an interesting question. I don't know if you can answer it. So this is a question from Ruth Parham. Do you have a favorite fellow sister, and if so, why?
Oh, hello, Ruth. It's like saying about I'm not a mother, but it's like saying to a mother, "Oh, who's your favorite child?" And of course they go, "Oh, I have no favorites." I guess I like all of them, and all of them are sort of me. So each of them is an aspect, like a particular part of my personality. Is there one that I find easiest to write? Yes, it's Stella. I'm not actually that much like Stella. She's a lot more freewheeling and a little bit more bohemian than I am, and I'm not a musician in any shape or form. But I do find her really easy to write for some reason.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, now we know. Thanks, Ruth, for your question.
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So we've been talking about women. Let's talk about the men in your books.
Okay.
So they range from perfectly good men to some awful sexist and/or violent ones, and even the obsolete men in your Martian society. So, do you think reframing how stories describe men away from hostile and toxic stereotypes and towards complexity and even vulnerability can be one of the ways that science fiction fantasy writers can break away from these harmful tropes that promote toxic masculinity and the dehumanization of women?
Yeah, I absolutely do. And I think we really, and I probably need to work a bit harder actually in getting the range of men, as I like to think I've got a range of women. I will say that sometimes they're there to serve the plot. There are a couple of novels set in not the Winter Strike universe so much, but in the Mondial universe, where there are some very, very toxic men. And I think it's realistic because those sorts of people do exist in the world. But at the same time, I tried to get away from that in the Fallows books because although there are a couple of male antagonists who are pretty unpleasant, but the men with whom the Fallows are actually personally involved are definitely sidekicks to the women. And Doctor Who is a big thing in British media, SF culture, and I grew up with Doctor Who, and he always had a female companion, sometimes one or two female companions, and she was always the sidekick. I don't want to be the sidekick. I want to be the Doctor.
Yeah.
And yay, we have got a female Doctor, had until recently. And I'm very pleased to see that she's not the first female Time Lord. There are others, but I wanted the men in the Fallows books to be supportive of the women. So they don't tend to do things, Ward and Sam don't tend to do things, Dark don't tend to do things like running off and having affairs with people or undermining the women. They're absolutely there to support the women. And I guess that's what makes it a fairy tale, essentially. But those men do exist. So let's big them up, even if it's not, I'm not going to make a big thing of this. I don't think anybody's going to start discussing it explicitly in the Fallows books, but the men are very much there to support the women, as women have been there to support the men in so many fantasy novels and science fiction novels in the past.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. All right, well, coming back to what I said about Martian society that you created, in Dreams of For's world, men are basically, I guess, unnecessary. Why did you include this interesting twist into the story?
Wickedness, basically, sheer wickedness. And I thought, and by the way, I'm so sorry because it is Lunai. I've got Lunai in the Banner of Souls books and Luna in the Fallows.
Luna in Fallows Sisters, yeah.
I forgot about Lunai, but you are quite correct. And I wanted to write Mars as a matriarchy because in the sort of the golden age of science fiction and fantasy, Edgar Rice Burroughs and so on, the women really are there just to fill out a chainmail bikini and be the romantic interest. And so Mars to me has always been very sort of male dominated in the public eye, and I wanted to change that. And then I thought, oh, just get rid of the men. Why not? Get rid of them. We don't need them anyway. So they're kind of reduced to essentially Morlocks.
Yeah,
And yes, I'm sure that's insulting, but I kind of don't care.
yeah. Good for you, Liz. Let me say that. Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting because you never see this anywhere, right? And it was such a new thing to experience in a book. So yeah, cool.
Yeah, I'm very glad somebody's picked that up actually, because it's, you know, we are having a lot of very feminist tellings of various tales at the moment, and I think that's fantastic. But I have consistently throughout, if I've tried to do anything throughout my career, I've tried to play around with gender norms and gender stereotypes and just mix it up a bit. And I think it also let me free because although I really did like the world that Susie McKee-Charnas built from a storytelling perspective. I didn't like the world itself, but from a fictional point of view and as a metaphor and a way of exploring things, it was very good. But I did feel that the time had perhaps it was a bit early, to move away from the idea that if we just had a matriarchy, everything would be fantastic.
Yeah.
And that's part of the complexity, because women are in many ways as unpleasant as men. Absolutely toxic, not toxic femininity in the sense of being a sort of a Stepford wife, but toxic femininity in the sense of just being a really crappy, bad human being.
Yes.
And I think I wanted to explore that. And what would happen if the men weren't there? Would they expand to fill out some of those toxic roles?
Yeah.
And in some ways they did, and in some ways they don't. So it's it's an interesting thing. But I must say, a lot of people have sort of taken those ideas are not unique to me, and a lot of people have taken the sort of the earlier work that influenced me and taken that in their own direction as well over the last 20, 30, 40 years or so, which is fantastic. We need as much as possible, really.
Yes, yeah. I always think it's an interesting exercise to see, like what you said, like how would a totally matriarchal society actually be? Like you would, ideally you would imagine it'll all be like flowers and rainbows and motherly people loving everyone. But no, like we were talking about before, women are people. So there will be some toxicity there as well. Yeah.
Yeah, there's going to be some toxicity, because I think the things like sociopathy are not confined to the male or narcissism, and those are real problems. And I do think a lot of bad female behavior in our world is as a result of patriarchal pressure. Definitely. Some of the behaviors that like the whole sort of mean girls thing in schools, a lot of that is as a result of growing up in a patriarchal society, not having any power, seizing power where you can, seizing it inappropriately. But I have my doubts that if the men were to magically disappear, I have my doubts that we would suddenly become all unicorns and rainbows. I don't think we would, and I don't think that's purely as a result of the patriarchy. I think we need to take some responsibility for, perhaps not being great people anyway. But there are women-dominated organisations which do work very well. I used to work for Brighton Women's Centre for many years, and that was a democratic steering committee-led organisation which did work really well, and that was solely female. And we had our problems. We had issues with some people, and they had issues with us. But in general, the organisation is still running 50. It might even be coming up to its 60th, and that's purely as a voluntary women's group. So I think matriarchal structures can work, but I do think also it depends on the policies behind them and how they're organised. Just replicating patriarchal structures doesn't work.
Yeah, right. All right, so let's talk about stories. So stories are one of the most powerful ways of bringing about social change. So let's talk about genre and writing. Now, in science fiction and fantasy, sometimes the line between consent isn't always very clear, whether it's epic fantasy, urban fantasy, paranormal romance, and certainly in some subgenres such as grimdark. violence against women is still often used as a catalyst for a male character's development or as a shorthand for showing how brutal the world is. Do you think this is an issue that writers in the genre have started tackling successfully in recent years?
Yeah, I think they have started looking at it, and I think there are some interesting ideas that are exploring around that. There's certainly been a lot of pushback to things like the girl in the movie gets stiffed within the first 15 minutes, and this causes the hero to go off onto his saga of revenge and so on. I think that's a terrible cliche, and it's essentially it's pointing to the expendability of women rather than the role of the male. That's the subtext to it.
Yes.
And I think there has been quite a lot of pushback about that, and that has started to change. I mean, I for my sins am a big fan of the Bond movies, and I know they're terrible in many respects.
Yeah.
That went through a whole kind of period of, it didn't start out that way. The early ones, there isn't the sort of, there's the innocent girl who gets killed, within the first sort of hour or so, leading Bond to go off on his, to kind of lend rocket fuel really to his mission against the antagonist. And there's usually a female villain. But that wasn't how they started off, and it's not how they've so far ended. They're moving away a little bit from that.
Yeah.
They're not great. I mean, they're a terrible example, really, to choose of. I'm not saying that they're non-sexist; they're incredibly sexist.
Yes.
But it is interesting to see how that sort of absolute bastion of male fantasy is starting to change.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
A bit. Well, maybe not enough, but
No, but in general, I think you're right. Pop culture is moving. It's slowly moving towards that. I think as people, it's what people want to see changes as well.
Yes, yes. And there is a lot of pushback to it. You only have to look at the sort of the manosphere and Andrew Tate and all that kind of horrible stuff to just think, oh God, here we are, we're going backwards. I think some people are going backwards, very definitely, and that's deliberate. But hopefully the whole shift of the culture is moving us in a more positive direction.
Yeah.
I'd like to think.
So I want to ask you about one of your books, Ghost Sister. There's a very interesting relationship between Mavenden and her brother. It's very complex, and he cherishes his sister even though she's basically an outcast. But there's always a question of danger, of his violence his violence against her lurking under the surface.
Yes.
Why did you decide to write a story where a woman faces harsh discrimination and this constant threat of violence from her family and from society just because of who she is?
Well, I think in the world of Ghost Sister in Mondial, which is a world I started writing about very early on when I was about 13, and it's not so much that although she is an outcast and she does face constant danger, they all face constant danger because they've all got this terrible potential for sudden violence, for bloodlust lurking within them, and that's the women as well as the men. And there are, I think, a couple of transgender characters in that particular novel and in that world. So it's more that it's sort of everybody rather than her specifically. And it struck me as, it's a dangerous world, and that's partly to do with storytelling reasons more than sort of sociological reasons.
Okay, yeah, right. I thought it was a very interesting concept, very interesting world that you created. I know I think that was your first book, right?
It was, yes, it was the first book published. Yeah.
Awesome. All right, so I want to ask you about geek culture. So geek culture in general, including science fiction and fantasy, has had its share of critics saying that it's still too male-dominated, despite there being a rising number of prominent and well-respected and well-known female authors. But there's still plenty of hostile, misogynist, and sexist behavior by male geeks towards female geeks.
Yes.
What do you think needs to be done to make geek culture as a whole, whether it's comics or gaming or books or cons, more welcoming for women and girls?
Well, I think they need to be. Sorry, you're not having a cat. You're having a Trevor.
A husband.
I'll just let him go. Oops, are you all right there?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
It's all right.
Sorry about this.
No, go on.
Yep, you're stable. You're not falling over. You're good. All right. Okay. Yeah, I think it does need to be made more welcoming, and I think a lot of people need to be told fairly sharply to grow up a bit.
Okay.
And that by those people, I mean male geeks,
Yeah.
because this thing of, oh, you're not a real comic book reader or fan if you don't adhere to certain principles. This is just rubbish, actually. And although this is a young person's thing, but not all young people are young, if you know what I mean. I think that there's a level of significant immaturity um, right throughout the culture, and that does need to change. The only way you can change it is by constantly pushing back and being a bit sharp with it, frankly. It really annoys me, I have to say. I do feel that conventions should be spaces for everybody, and that they should be inclusive,
Yes.
and they're not.
Yeah,
So
it's a bit weird that people. I think it's a question of people just not wanting to share, and
yeah,
we have authors saying that it's not a pie if you can't, it's not a limited amount of something
no,
you're going to lose out if you share it, to share the space.
you're
I think,
absolutely not,
yeah,
and no, you're absolutely not, and you're not going to run out of it either. There's going to be
yeah,
there is enough for everybody. There's enough pie. There are
yeah,
different pies. There's lots of pies,
yeah.
and the idea that this sort of gatekeeping and sorry, I was just checking on Trevor. He hasn't fallen down the stairs. This sort of checking and inclusivity.
Do you
A
do you
minute.
want to go?
No, it's sorry about this. It's yeah. He's for the sake of people watching at home. He has just had a couple of strokes, so we're a little bit concerned about him. I'm not usually like, where is my husband? What is he doing? Oh God, he's going up the stairs. So he's suffering from a hopefully temporary disability. So apologies for that. But I think, I think it does need to be a little bit more diverse and inclusive. And I also think there needs to stop this gatekeeping all the time. And it's a tribalism, but it's a toxic tribalism. And
Yes.
it's to shut people out. It's done specifically to shut people out, and that is not on.
Yes. Yeah.
So, yes, it's very cross-making.
No, we understand how you feel. Don't worry. We feel the same way
Oh,
here
no,
at the project. Yes. All right. Well, believe it or not, we have been speaking for almost an hour.
oh,
Uh,
Lord.
so I'm going to ask you our last few questions. This is a kind of a two-part question.
Okay.
So you, Liz, have been so very incredibly supportive of our Read for Pixels campaign and our anti-violence against women work as a whole. This is a bit of an obvious question, but we ask all the authors we have on this. Why do you support the cause to end violence against women?
Okay, so I've seen the results of it. I'm fortunate in that I have not experienced domestic violence or abuse myself. But as I mentioned, I used to work for a women's centre on the south coast of England, and we worked alongside a domestic violence project. And a lot of the issues there were brought home to me in a very direct way, and they were extremely problematic. And these are things that I experienced. I experienced the culture, obviously, growing up. We had in the late 70s and early 80s a lot of Reclaim the Night marches. But I was about to try and make it safer for women to go out after dark. I've always been aware that the culture in which I lived was a dangerous one for women. It's not the most dangerous, but it still is dangerous. And at the time when I was about to go off to university in Manchester, the Yorkshire Ripper was killing women throughout the north.
Gosh.
And he was not the only one, and he still is not the only one. We've had this appalling case recently of a policeman kidnapping and murdering somebody.
Yeah, I read about that.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. And this constant sort of thread throughout the culture of violence towards women. The statistics are appalling in this country, and this country is probably safer than many others. So I think this is a cause that I think we need to keep very much in the public eye, and we need to keep chipping away at it because it's unacceptable.
Yes. So, what do you think authors such as yourself can do to help with the cultural change needed to eradicate violence against women and girls?
So I think we need to keep writing stories in which it is shown to be unviable, unacceptable, and just plain wrong. But I do think that we also need to do a little bit, if we can. Not everybody's in the position where they are able to, of a little bit of activism as well, and put out. I feel the need, certainly. I won't speak for anybody else. I feel the need to put my money where my mouth is, and to put my feet where my mouth is. Go on demonstrations. Keep pushing back.
Yes. Yeah. Or if you not the kind of person who wants to go out and do things, you can do things like this. Watch our Read for Pixels, learn about
Absolutely.
it. Yeah. Ask
Yeah.
questions of authors, or encourage people to watch these things and learn stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, there's all sorts of support you can give. There's a wide range of support you can give. Not everybody is in a position to be able to go out.
Yes.
If you're disabled in any way, but don't feel helpless, because
Yes.
there's always something you can do.
Yes. And there are lots of voices out there that you can listen to, and you can, yeah, you'll find something that feels right for you to do. Yeah.
Absolutely, yes. To add your voice to the multitude of voices.
Yes. Right. Yeah. So that was our last question. So
Thank you.
thank you so much, Liz, for answering all our questions, and thank you everyone who's watching. And for we had one question, but there were a few people watching. So I'm going to
That's
put
great.
myself back on screen. Oh, whoops, sorry.
Hello?
I
That's okay.
meant it. Yes.
Sorry.
Hi everyone. All right. So just in case you missed the beginning of the stream, I'm going to tell you again about all the amazing goodies that Liz has donated to the stash of swag we have set up on our Rally Up fundraising page. So the first one is the Liz Williams paperback and ebook starter book bundle. And this is available for donors worldwide. The bundle contains a signed and personalized paperback edition of Comet Weather, signed and personalized paperback novella Phosphorus, and then the ebook edition of Comet Weather and the ebook edition of Phosphorus. And all the paperbacks in this bundle will be signed and personalized with any name you like. You just have to tell us. And all the ebooks will be sent to the donor directly by the publisher. And so that's the first goodie. And the second one is a 30-minute Zoom call with Liz Williams. So Liz has generously donated 30 minutes of her time to one Read for Pixels donor, where she'll be happy to chat about the art and craft of writing, about publishing books, your favorite fantasy books, and more with you. The session will be conducted in English, and it's open to individual donors or book clubs or libraries. So that is a
Yes.
very rare treat. It's only one of this is available, so go get it before someone else does. And if you are looking for more stuff, we have plenty more goodies available from authors and publishers. There's stuff from Kimberly Bell, Liz Williams, Sonali Dev, Chloe Lees, Angela Eureka Smith, Adiba Jagrida, Carol Goodman, Liana Renee Haber, Romina Garber. We have book bundles from Entangle Publishing and Black Spot Books and more. And new goodies are going to be released every week. Now, I said before, we've had a kind of a slow start to our fundraiser. We've only raised $2,380, that's US dollars, towards our $5,000 goal so far. So please do give generously before the fundraiser ends on the 15th of April. All funds go towards the Pixel Project's work to help end violence against women. Now, I'm going to share a little slide. There it is. So these are the links for you, and our moderator Regina is going to put them up in the chat box as well. So if you want to find out about the goodies, go to our Rally Up page at tinyurl.com/r4p Rally Up IWD 2023. If you're typing this, it's case sensitive, so be careful, but the link is in the chat box. And if you want to find out more about Read for Pixels, about all the other authors that we've had on and that we are going to have on, go check out our Read for Pixels page, bit.ly/Read for Pixels. And yeah. All right, so we have something else we want to tell you about. It's the Pixel Project's Shirley Jackson Award nominated and Audie Award nominated short story anthology called Giving the Devil His Due. It's sort of like The Twilight Zone meets Promising Young Women. And it features stories from 16 amazing authors, including Stephen Graham Jones, Christina Henry, Kelly Armstrong, Linda D. Addison, and so many more. The anthology is available in ebook, paperback, and audiobook form for order from major booksellers worldwide, including Amazon, Kobo, Google Play, Book Depository, and more. For audiobook fans, the audiobook is available from Spotify, Barnes & Noble, Google Play, Audible, anywhere really. Yeah. For paperback fans, we have teamed up with 12 of the 16 authors to offer an exclusive limited edition bundle. Exclusive limited edition book plate for early bird buyers. So each author will sign 16 book plates, and it'll be first come, first served. Each book plate includes a resource for domestic violence and sexual assault victims and survivors in 205 countries. So this is the link for the audiobook, which is also going up in the chat box. And this is Audie nominated. And the Audie Awards are in, I think, 2 days, and we'll find out whether we won or not. But go and check it out. So yeah, and so all net proceeds from the anthology, from the paperback and the audiobook, go towards keeping the Pixel Project's campaigns, programs, and initiatives such as this one alive and kicking. And if you want to find out more about the violence against women, about what you can do to help prevent or stop it, go to our website. We have a lot of resources there, www.thepixelproject.net, and the link for that is going in the chat box as well. All right, before we go, Liz has some announcements.
I do, yes. There is the final, for now, book, the fourth in the Fallow Sisters series, that is Salt on the Midnight Fire, and that has a release date now of June the 21st, and I gather that's going up for pre-release, for pre-order from Ian Waits at Newcon Press later on this week. So that is great. And I'd also like to do a big plug for the Milford Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers anthology. That's something that we've just brought out ourselves from the Milford Workshop, and that is to specifically fund a bursary for non-white and economically disadvantaged writers to attend the workshop. We've been running the bursary for a few years. It's been very successful so far, and we'd like to continue to run it. So we've set up the anthology, which has an previously unpublished story by Neil Gaiman in it, as well as, because he is an attendee of the workshop, as well as many more. So we'd love you to put your pennies towards that and help support the bursary scheme.
Yeah. Sorry, did you say it's out or it's coming out?
It's out now.
It's out
Yes,
now.
it's out.
Okay. And
Yeah.
and where can people get it?
And it's on Amazon. It's called Eclectic Dreams, the Milford Writers Anthology.
Right.
So that should be up. I'll put a link to it on my Facebook page as well.
All right, cool. Go check that out, everyone. All right, so that's it from us. So thank you once again, Liz, for doing this with us. And thank you, everybody, for watching. And we'll say good morning, good evening, good night, wherever you are in the world, and goodbye.
Bye-bye.